Hello and welcome to Lord of the Board. My name is Sam Smith, and today we are going to be doing a Kickstarter preview of the brand new expansion to Root, the Marauders Expansion. And trust me, it probably won't look like this. I am honestly so stoked right now to be able to talk about the brand new expansion coming to Root. Now, before I really dive in, I just want to let you know that everything that you see today, components-wise and rules-wise and literally everything, it's all going to be a prototype copy. Obviously, the official box cover art is not going to have blue tape, or at least I hope it doesn't, but if it does, you know, hey, I love Root. I'll probably support it anyways. But the fact is that I have a prototype copy of this expansion, so everything is subject to change. Now, this expansion comes with a lot of different elements that are actually here to improve the two-player system. They've also got things to make the setup a little bit different, more competitive for players that want to take the game to another level. So we are going to dive into both the new factions, the Warlord Rats and the Badger Seekers. We are going to talk about the new Hirelings, and then we are going to discuss the new setup module that you can add to your games. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, first off, we have got the ruthless roiled rats that lay waste to the entire woodland, conquering its clearings by destruction over the land. And unlike most factions in Root, the warlord rats are incentivized to constantly pry at enemies' lines and loot from their opponents' buildings. And at the heart of this force of renegade rodents lies the warlord themselves, a banner-wielding powerhouse who leads the front lines to battle, never looking back at the desolation and disarray behind them. Now, the main engine of the rats is their horde, which is a collection of items that can be gained by either crafting cards or looting opponents' buildings, and depending on the type of item they get, this will increase one of two attributes, which is going to be logistics and prowess. Now, logistics will actually determine your faction's actions that you will have in daylight, whether that be moving, battling, or even building your strongholds. Then your prowess is all about what your warlord can do. You can advance up to the number of your prowess after your main actions have finished. Now, what exactly is an advance? An advance allows your warlord to move and then battle, and you can do this up to the number of your current prowess. So you can see how you could just scourge across the map, annihilating everything in your path, or swinging to the other side just with sheer movement in a matter of seconds. They're crazy fast, and they zip across the map like nobody's business as long as you're focusing on building up your prowess. Now, you also get rat warriors equal to your prowess that spawn alongside your warlord every single bird song. And speaking of the start of the day, the very first thing that you're going to do every single turn is change your mood. Now, there are a lot of different mood cards, and depending on what items you actually have in your horde, that's going to determine which one of your mood cards you can actually use. So the more items that you have, the less benefits that you're going to be able to take advantage of. Now, this all sounds like good fun, but how exactly do these rats score victory points? Well, they actually score their victory points in the evening by a scoring mechanism called Oppress. Now, what this does is that if there are any clearings that you rule that have no enemy pieces in them, that will count for scoring, and depending on how many of those types of clearings you have will determine how many points you get. And one of the ways that you're able to really clear these clearings very quickly are with fire tokens. Flame tokens are one of the many ways that you can actually foil your opponent's plans. Setting a fire in the evening and letting it burn till birdsong without being extinguished will cause all of the cardboard, even the ruins included, to be removed. This is the very first time that we're going to have a faction that can actually manipulate the ruins other than the Vagabond. However, in the morning, this fire has a chance to spread by rolling a dice and seeing which clearing it's going to spread to next. And this can really work as a balancing act, as these are still free points for your opponents. So are you going to stick with your fire as it spreads randomly around the board, or are you going to leave those flame tokens unattended for your opponents to get some extra points? One of the many balancing acts that the Warlord faction really has to deal with. One other aspect of them is that as you play them, you'll find that they are incredibly card poor, and it makes complete sense, because why would woodland critters even want to be associated with a tyrant infestation of rats that are burning down the woodland? So it ends up becoming a game of trying not to spread yourself too thin, too fast. But at the same time, you've got to keep momentum, otherwise you will fizzle out like the flames that you are creating. Now, where the rats are fast and they swarm the board like an undefended clearing, we've got the badgers, who are incredibly slow and really the exact opposite of the rats. In fact, the badgers have one of the most unique ways of scoring that we have seen to date with Root. You're trying to collect these relics from the forest and bring them back to your way stations. And honestly, I'm not really sure exactly what they're doing with these relics. I'm kind of thinking that maybe they're tomb raiders and they're actually stealing these from the forest. But I can also see the argument that maybe they are naturalists and they're trying to restore the forest back to maybe its former glory. But either way, it is a very interesting puzzle to play, because it's mainly based on traveling around the board delivering these relics. But in stark contrast to their mission of scoring points being travel-oriented, the Seekers are very cumbersome and can only move one badger at a time, making them very immobile. And the only way to bypass this is with their carts, where they can move up to 3 badgers at a time. So these relic-seeking badgers are all about timing and planning, and that will be the main puzzle when playing them. But to help protect them against the occupants, as they are very slow, they are also heavily armored. And being heavily armored means that they can soak one hit in every single battle. Even if they're ambushed, that's going to just take that hit out of the way, and then they basically perform a normal combat. But if you're just rolling your dice against them and you roll a 3, you're only going to remove up to 2 badgers. So they are very sturdy and fierce warriors. Now, one of their more interesting concepts is their planning for the next turn with their carts. In your birdsong, you can place a cart at a way station, or you can replace an already existing cart with a new way station. And remember, these carts can be moved around to transport up to 3 badgers, so you can position them into place and then turn them into a way station for the delivery space for your relics. One of my favorite actions that they have is actually the escort action, which allows you to remove a badger warrior from a clearing, and you can draw a card from the top of the deck, or you can draw a card from the top of the discard pile if it matches the clearing of the removed warrior. This leads to a lot of interesting options, especially if you just spent a card that turn and you need to get back the card that you just spent. So you actually have that option to grab it immediately, and even have the option to use that same card again. So essentially, the badgers are going to have to take these relics from the nearby forests and then transport them to clearings that have way stations that match the suit of those relics. And if they are able to recover it, then they are going to get the benefit on their board, and this track goes up in victory points, but stays the same in the other benefit that you can get. I think what I like most about playing the badgers is that they really feel like a bruiser root faction. They can take a lot of punch with not a lot of warriors, and they are very, very slow as you're transporting them across the map, almost like lumbering trolls attempting to bring their treasure back to their cave before the warring factions attempt to stop them. Now, one of the biggest surprises within this expansion has got to be the hirelings. These are basically mini factions that are able to be added to a game that really add this whole new element to Root. Now, what it does is it adds an influence system where at the end of your evening you're able to roll 2 dice and you'll get a certain amount of influence that you can spend to take control of a certain faction, or even shift the control from your opponent. And the coolest thing is that each of these are actually based off of an existing faction in the game, but they come with their own unique meeples. So for example, we've got the Forest Patrol, which basically starts everywhere on the board like the standard Marquise, except that when you take control of them, you can use some of their warriors to battle on your behalf, or if warriors have fallen and ended up back on this card, you're able to actually put them back onto the board in a clearing with other Forest Patrol warriors. We've also got this adorable roving bear with an amazingly cute meeple, and you are able to feed him items to give him more actions, and with those actions you can actually attack your enemy factions from the forest. He is super fun to play with as well. All of these add such a unique element to the game, but each one of these hireling cards has two sides. They've got the regular version, and then they've also got this demoted version. And depending on the amount of players that you're going to have, you're going to demote more. And a demoted side basically just means that you're not going to be playing with the meeples. They'll just provide your faction with an ability when you acquire the card. And the coolest thing about the influence is that in a two-player game especially, it is a way to truly balance the game. Me and my wife had games that were ending at 30 points and 29 points in a two-player game of Root, which is absolutely insane. How exactly does this happen? Well, with those influence dice, there are certain sides that basically give you more influence if you are a certain number of victory points behind the player in the lead. And by this, the player who is losing is going to be able to influence the board more and take advantage of these hirelings, fixing that balance of power throughout the game. There is one more card that is actually required in a two-player game if playing with this system, and that is going to be the initiative card. This costs 3 influence to take from your opponent and essentially will give you a whole extra turn. 3 influence is something that is really hard to achieve, and you have to be pretty far back behind in order to get it. This can really help factions that are falling behind away from another player to jump right back into the action and keep the game tight and neat throughout the entire two-player Root experience. And lastly, we have got a new way to set up Root. And this is something that makes me so happy because this is based off of a competitive way to set up the game where you are basically drafting the factions. Factions with a higher reach are going to have these red borders, and factions with lower reach are going to have white borders. And you are always going to grab at least one of the red factions, randomly grab one, placing it face up on the table, then shuffling all the rest of the faction cards and laying down cards equal to the number of players. So there will always be one extra faction to the number of players. Then starting with the first player and going around the table, they're going to take their faction of choice and set up immediately. And the coolest thing about this is that this is a natural balancer for some factions that just have a disadvantage based purely on setup alone and also turn order. So the cats have a whole new setup where they can literally start anywhere on the board. And the lizards can also do that, which really helps the lizards because they'll have a hand of cards sometimes, and when you have to start in a corner, sometimes that clearing does not match your cards that you have. But now being able to really choose where you start really makes a huge difference in the game. And I just don't see a world where I'm going to be playing not with this new Root setup system. It is so clean, it is so great, and it really makes the game have a ton more variety in a game that was already so filled with variety. Just makes me so happy to see that the developers saw that the game was going in a more tournament direction and more competitive direction, and they did something about it, and also in the meantime fixed a problem in Root where the setup was just getting a little bit too clunky. So that is really everything that you're going to be getting in the Marauders expansion, at least to my knowledge. I am going to be looking at the campaign, and I hope that you are also going to be looking at the campaign and consider jumping in on this expansion. With all of the stuff that you're going to be getting included, the hirelings, the 2 new factions, as well as the setup system, what are you most excited about? What are you ready to add to your game? I know personally that the hirelings have been such a highlight of my gaming experience with my wife. And I just don't see me playing this game 2-player without those ever again. It was some of the most fun I have ever had playing a game of Root. I know that the 2 new factions really add a lot to the table, especially those badgers. They really changed the game up with those relics. You're going to be having a lot of different factions vying for control over these relics that are traveling around the board to way stations, and the rats that are just swarming in and literally infest the entire map with their pestilence. It's a really, really great experience, and I think that this is the perfect expansion that the Root community needed. If you already have Root, if you already have the other expansions of Root, this is probably going to be an essential expansion. Heck, why are you even here listening to me? I'm sure you're already jumping on and purchasing the expansion, but I hope that I was able to help with a small part of you getting an idea of what you're getting into here. And folks, heads up, what you're getting into here is excellent, it is wonderful, and it is a perfect addition to the game and world of Root. But that is it for the Marauders expansion. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not already, please subscribe to the channel as well as like this video so that more people can see it. And with that, let's go ahead and drop the beat.